Welcome back to New Rockstars, I'm Erik Voss, and Marvel's Eternals has a new trailer that rewrites our creation mythology with giant armored space gods who have had quite enough of us.
How long do we have?
7 days.
I'm gonna break down everything you missed in this trailer, frame by frame, to explain who the Eternals are, their relationship with Thanos and the Celestials, and how this film will crack the MCU wide open. Spoiler warning in case any of my theories are right. Also, we have a new Latest Obsession shirt inspired by What If Cosmic Witness, which you can get at newrockstarsmerch.com. Here we go.
5 years ago, Thanos erased half of the population of the universe. But the people of this planet brought everyone back with a snap of a finger.
So we open on Eternals Ajak and Ikaris. Ajak is the Eternals' healer and spiritual leader who can communicate with their creators, the Celestials. She lives in this remote western house and rides up to see Ikaris staring her down on top of the hill. Honestly, a worrisome sight to come home to, like an exiled gunslinger realizing, ah damn, they found me. Ajak references Thanos snapping away half of all life in Infinity War and Hulk snapping them back in Endgame. Thanos is an Eternal, son of Alars, who was an Eternal brother to the Eternal Zuras, who was Thena's father, making Thena and Thanos dozens. Now, Thanos was born with a deviant gene, but since he was born to eternal parents, he remains more eternal than deviant, just an outcast to the Eternal Society. Now, as an obsessive watcher of stuff who cut my teeth on things like Lost, I cannot help but see this as the Lost Season 5 prologue scene, the meeting between the mystery figures Jacob and the Man in Black, both immortal brethren who dwell among ancient ruins and debate over whether to intervene in human conflicts. Just because similarly I sense an antagonistic relationship between Ikaris and Ajak here. Like Ikaris is someone unable to communicate with their creators, something that might have pissed him off over the years, and who later in the trailer emotionally fires his optic lasers at this same farmhouse location. And Ajak is strangely absent from the rest of the Eternals and other shots of this trailer. Just keep that in mind. Meanwhile, the music is a mournful female vocal, part of the score by composer Ramin Djawadi, who you might know from doing the amazing music of Game of Thrones and Westworld. His music there deeply interwoven with that show's similar themes of immortality and flawed creators, which are at the heart of this story. Moving on.
The sudden return of the population provided the necessary energy for the emergence to begin.
Okay, we see Earth at the moment Hulk snapped everyone back. As the sun rises on Europe, population zones flood with light to represent the sudden return of half the world's population. But before we get there, you can see faint glows in Norway and then down in Central Africa, representing the regions of New Asgard and Turnsburg, and Wakanda, two major regions from which backup arrived in that Battle of Earth in Endgame. Though some nerdy griping here, this would imply sunrise happened in Moscow in this moment, which would have made it in the middle of the night in upstate New York. Also, the tilt of the Earth toward the sun means that the northern hemisphere is in the middle of summer, not October when the Battle of Endgame was actually set. Gripes that we would have really no problem with if we were flat earthers, but alas, we worship at the altar of Arishem. Anyway, imagery shows astral bodies swirling into formation until one star explodes in a flash of red, where, if you go frame by frame through this, bends the space around it and stems outward briefly like blood vessels in a giant cornea, similar to the way these Celestials also stem outward in these golden lines before their form appears. We could be looking at the birth or hatching of a Celestial, maybe Arishem, whose color is a similar shade of red, from a cosmic body that it was using as a gestation pod. Since we know Ego, who is also a Celestial in the MCU, took the form of a living planet, his brain buried deep in that planet's core, and he explained his origin story in tableaus contained in shells resembling eggshells, and pilots himself around in a ship that is modeled off of an egg. Now, Ajak describes a coming event called the emergence, caused apparently by the sudden return of half the population. Sounds like the Celestials might consider that sudden overpopulation a cosmic violation by the Avengers that must be fixed. So the emergence could describe the resurrection of the deviants, which might be seen by the Celestials as a population control protocol. But Ajak makes it sound like the return of life spiked energy on Earth, as if the Earth is feeding from all those life forces on it, the way way an egg needs to reach critical mass energy before it hatches. So this could be the emergence of a celestial gestating inside the Earth, the way Ego used his planet as a kind of shell. In the comics, there is a celestial known as Tiamat, the dreaming celestial who sleeps buried in a vault underneath the mountains on Earth. I'll come back to this batshit theory, but let's keep going.
How long do we have?
7 days.
We see an asteroid striking the Earth, creating a complete shockwave that blasts out the clouds in the atmosphere. We could be looking at the asteroid that formed the Gulf of Mexico right at the end of the Cretaceous period 66 million years ago that killed 75% of life on Earth, including all the non-avian dinosaurs. This could be part of the universe creation montage that might open the film, but the editing makes it seem like this is what causes the tidal waves that ravage that tropical terrain in the next shot. But in that destruction, you can make out some man-built structures that would totally not exist during the Cretaceous period, so I think this is from a different scene, maybe showing a more recent apocalyptic event like the submergence of Atlantis or Lemuria, or the new emergence that Ajax warned about. Because this destruction just seems more uncharacteristically seismic than a tsunami or an asteroid collision, like the crust itself is completely falling apart and opening up from below. Like tsunamis are super destructive, but they don't completely crumble land masses like that. Ajax tells Icarus they have 7 days till this happens. Obviously some biblical allusions to the book of Genesis in which God created the earth in 7 days. In Marvel mythology, the Celestials created the earth and apparently can take us back out of it in the same amount of time. Next clip.
We're Eternals. We came here 7,000 years ago to protect humans from the deviants.
This section offers the Eternals' origin story, the 10 of them surrounding the form of Erishim, who drops a golden orb into the throat of Ajax, awakening her, and maybe a kind of blessing that allows Ajax to be their mouthpiece. Kind of like, kids, Ajax getting the phone, okay, so don't separate from her. Mommy and Daddy are gonna be at the pool bar. Now, in the comics, the Eternals are one of 3 races created on Earth by the Celestials, along with humans and deviants. Deviants were beastly hostiles, and Eternals are these superpowered immortals who protect mankind from the deviants. Meanwhile, the Celestials' origins are explored in later comics. They're said to have been created by the aspirants in their own image, and aspirants were created by the first firmament, and all of this hierarchy beneath a meta entity known as the One Above All, considered to be a form of comics creator Jack Kirby, or in the MCU, Stan Lee or Kevin Feige. I don't expect the Eternals film to go that high up the ladder, but the Celestials created the Eternals 7,000 years ago, which, interestingly, is when many early human civilizations began recording their progress with things like trade and agriculture in our history. Like, there are specific regions on Earth where these civilizations began to spring up, like along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in ancient Mesopotamia, the Nile in Egypt, Indus River in Pakistan and the Indian subcontinent, and the Yellow River in China, and then over in the Western Hemisphere, a whole bunch of groups along the Andes Mountains in South America. So these Eternals with names like Thena, Icarus, Phastos, Gilgamesh all correspond to figures from real-world human mythology from different regions around the world. It's because those figures were probably based on these Eternals. And then more of that scene we saw in the teaser, the seaside tribe looking out at the ocean, now revealed to be a deviant attacking this boy while he's fishing. The deviant has an interesting design. Forked tongue, nostril slits, long barbels, or stingers like ones you'd see on a fish. Icarus saves this kid by firing lasers from his eyes, which, along with his powers of flight, bring up an interesting parallel to a recent episode of Marvel's What If.
Are you sure you cannot fly or shoot lasers out of your eyes or something?
Suggesting the Collector might have had some past experience with another superhero from Earth, Icarus. And as Icarus rams that deviant, he flies directly into its mouth. And I don't think you can go to the Collector for dental. Next clip.
Why didn't you guys help fight Thanos? Or any war, or all the other terrible things throughout history?
We were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
By who?
So the human character, Dane Whitman, who will become Marvel's Black Knight, asks the Eternal Cersei the question we've all been wondering about since the first teaser: why the hell didn't they help the Avengers against Thanos? Well, it turns out they are bound by a kind of commandment from the Celestials to not intervene with human conflicts unless deviants are involved. And again, while Thanos does possess a deviant gene, he is still mostly eternal. So perhaps the Earth Eternals were left a bit unsure what to do when Thena's cousin showed up and started beating everyone up. And among these tragic human conflicts, the Eternals Eternals had to just stand aside and watch are the European conquest of Mesoamerica, with Druig watching these pyramids burn, and a mushroom cloud from an atomic bomb, maybe even one of the ones from Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Phastos cries, consoled by Ajak among some burnt ruins. Now, Phastos, as the Eternals engineer, might have contributed to some human technological breakthroughs like nuclear energy in the early 20th century, which the Americans could have taken and used for the Manhattan Project against his will, leaving Phastos in this profound regret, like scientists like Einstein and Oppenheimer. But hey, imagine this scenario. You got a big date or an important job interview, or you're about to be in front of millions of people watching you on YouTube, but wait a second, what's that? A huge zit? Who invited that to the party? Well, today's sponsor, Frontman, is here to help you disinvite your unwelcome acne guest. So, Frontman Fade is a skin-colored cream with proven acne-fighting ingredients. It covers acne while treating it. It's dermatologist developed and made with natural extracts. What greasy spot? Look, you'll be looking better in literally 10 seconds. Frontman Fade won't clog your pores, and it's sweat-proof, which is good for me because some of my videos can get pretty intense. It's like I'm running a 10K through these missable details, am I right? So grab yourself some Frontman Fade to cover your acne while treating it. Head to befrontman.com/new rockstars or use the link in the description for 15% off your order. Moving on. Okay, here we see the glory shot of the celestial Arishem the Judge looming over us with amazing scale, with all this space dust swirling around him like rings floating around Saturn. Now, there are many celestials in the comics, but from concept art, we think this movie will feature at least Arishem the Judge, Jemiah the Analyzer, Nezar the Calculator, and Hargan the Measurer, who all seem to be part of a jury panel to determine a planet's worthiness to survive. Celestials have appeared in the MCU before, like Ego, Peter Quill's dad, is a celestial in the MCU, and Isan the Searcher from the Collector's Story in Guardians of the Galaxy, who once wielded the Power Stone. Also, the setting of Nowhere is the severed head of a Celestial, and we've seen Celestial design celebrated in the decor of the Grandmaster's Arena on Sakaar in Thor Ragnarok. Interesting how Arishem's armor appears scarred and broken up, at least compared to the later shot of Jemiah, revealing Arishem's glowing tissue underneath. I wonder if he could be coming from some epic battle among Celestials, perhaps what ended with Nowhere getting beheaded. Yes, I know in the Marvel Comics, Nowhere was beheaded by the Clintar deity Null, but Null is a symbiote linked with Venom, and Carnage might be a Sony thing, and Marvel Studios is probably gonna retcon away from that, if they decide to ever answer that question. And the November title contains a tiny little symbol that fades away. And then at the end of the trailer, the November 5th title card is turned sideways in kind of a bow tie. Also fades there. You could see these as a symbol of a double helix DNA for ancestry, and then the other one for maybe infinity, both of them fading away like these Eternals are severing their ancestral links to the infinite Celestials. Onward.
We need to find the others.
I haven't seen some of them for centuries.
Hi.
Hello.
This is what the end of the world looks like. At least we have front row seats.
Okay, we embark deep into the Amazon rainforest to Druig's commune. Now, Druig is known as the moody loner of the Eternals, and now he is living in present-day Peru. It looks like some community isolated from modern society, perhaps using mind control, given the culty look of this group. Thena and Gilgamesh spar with weapons and armor conjured from mystical energy. Gilgamesh's gauntlet, with the circular pattern that actually composes all of this mystical energy that they use, looks a bit like the Infinity Gauntlet forged by Eitri from his model. Then this volcano erupts. Now, this is not Vesuvius from Loki, but I think it could be connected to the Great Cataclysm from the comics, a disaster in an ancient war that involved the Atlanteans, the Deviants, and the Celestials. The ancient kingdom of Atlantis, which used to be land-based, tried to repel a deviant invasion by opening up magma pits, creating volcanic eruptions all over the continent. And the second host of the Celestials then caused a nuclear cataclysm against the Deviants that ended up sinking the deviant-controlled kingdom of Lemuria, but also Atlantis, which could be the way we get Namor the Submariner in the MCU, or get an answer of what those underwater earthquakes Okoye mentioned were all about. Either way, this does not seem like a natural volcanic eruption, because in that smoke, and actually later in the closer shot of the lava, you can see a bolt of golden lightning and a violet flash in the smoke plume. This just looks like the result of some kind of interference by the Eternals and or the Deviants. Sprite says,
This is what the end of the world looks like. At least we have front row seats.
which reminds me a lot of Steve Buscemi's line in Armageddon.
Look, we got front row tickets to the end of the earth.
Moving on.
You know what's never saved the planet? Your sarcasm.
We've
loved these people since the day we arrived.
So in the Eternals treasure room, there's a golden statue of a cat, perhaps the Egyptian goddess of Bastet, from whom the Wakandan panther deity Bast was derived. Previous teasers showed this room also contains all kinds of historical relics, stuff from ancient Rome, and even the Holy Grail cup from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Maybe Makari is under house arrest here because she intervened and saved a human from a falling column in one of those past disasters. Phastos raises the Eternal ship from beneath the earth from what looks like an archaeological dig site already underway. Sprite puts on a fireworks display based on the blue walls, looks like the ancient city of Babylon that we've seen in other footage. And notice how she first shows them the various constellations and a Viking ship rowing toward a mountainous coastline. This could be depicting the ancient people of Norway, who also benefited from divine intervention, the Asgardians. Marvel's What If Episode 1 included an Italian textbook about the Tesseract with the passages describing how the ancients followed the constellations and from those formed their beliefs in the gods, which would include Odin of Asgard, but also in this case, maybe even these Eternals as well. Moving on.
When you love something, you protect it.
Icarus and Cersei bond with these ancient farmers that were shown in the previous trailer as people they use their powers to cultivate crops. They may have actually used parts of the Embers of Genesis that we learned about in What If, which was an artifact that vastly expands agricultural production on any planet. Dane and Cersei are in Camden Lock in London as a double-decker bus flips toward them, but notice behind Dane there is Sprite, but also a duplicate Sprite to the left, and then 3 other duplicate Cerseis calmly walking across the street. And this is because one of Sprite's abilities is to cast illusions, which I assume she's using against whatever deviants are wrecking this bus at them. But then Cersei uses her power to turn the whole bus into rose petals. Hope no one was on it. This is a bit similar to when Doctor Strange turned an attack into butterflies in his wizard duel with Thanos in Infinity War. Then Cersei appears in this mysterious vast chamber. What is this place? It's got triangular panels inlaid with more of those golden circular patterns, but behind the panels is this much bigger room with a steampunky looking column containing a glowing orb. And this looks a lot like the device that Phastos designed on a smaller scale in the first teaser. Also a golden steampunk column with a glowing center. Now using Cersei's height to scale, this has got to be way too big to fit on the Eternal ship. Instead, I'm wondering if this could be either inside of a Celestial or inside the Celestial buried on Earth, because there is no light source here other than that one orb of the column. And when Cersei touches the smaller panel of the wall, it hardens over into a wall of scales. But inside of that were some crystalline geodes and what looks like nerve endings. Maybe a kind of fusion of tissue and minerals, kind of similar to the multifaceted composition of the Celestials, armor and tissue. This could be an extreme macro close-up of celestial tissue. Moving on to the next part.
You can't protect. Any of them.
The Eternals work together to slay this deviant in that fishing village, and then another Celestial, this is Jemiah the Analyzer, manifests himself out of nowhere, which we also saw the Eternals doing earlier when they walked up. And this big guy beams energy from his hands in a kind of cat's cradle that swirls together a galaxy. I assume this is all part of some epic universal creation montage. Makari leaps at supersonic speeds, and then Thena is held by this deviant, but one with more humanoid features. Now in the comics, Thena has a forbidden romance with the deviant leader, Crow, who this probably is. And he has 4 eyes across his face, maybe a form he shapeshifted into, but as he strokes her cheek, a faint glimmer of her golden energy glows from under her skin. Next clip. So Icarus fights a flying deviant over the Amazon rainforest region of Druig's community, and he lasers off its wing and then tackles it to the ground. I don't know, I just get the feeling that the deviants might not be all that bad, and Icarus is just going Homelander on these guys against the wishes of the other Eternals. Let's move on to the last clip.
I bet you've built the perfect safe house. I mean, what's this even made of? Vibranium?
Fall collection. IKEA.
Okay, so Icarus and Cersei are meeting Phastos in his home, where you can see some games all over the place: chess, Connect 4, coloring book, game controller, other toys, because Phastos has a family with kids and a husband. Icarus thinks the table's made of vibranium, but it's actually the IKEA Fall Collection. Setting this movie in, I'm gonna say fall 2023, maybe even the 7 days after the Endgame battle in October 2023, since Ajax said 5 years ago. And originally, this movie was supposed to come out right before WandaVision, a show that takes place 3 weeks after Endgame. Why does that matter? Well, because the world is still there in WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier and Spider-Man Far From Home, so I think we can assume those Celestials effectively effed off. We're gonna be talking a lot more about this movie as it gets closer, but you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EA Voss. Follow and subscribe to New Rockstars. Thanks for watching. Bye.